Michael Gove is, I think, almost universally viewed, and I think quite rightly, as being one of the brightest, efficient minds in the party. And almost the stage management of her interview that she gave on Sunday, with him kind of just sitting just off camera and commenting on it directly afterwards, was quite remarkable and quite dramatic. I think what we're hearing, actually, is that there is going to be a U-turn on the 45p top rate of tax. How that's then framed, I think it's quite interesting. Is it like a delay, or are they actually just going to hold their hands up and do a full screeching U-turn? And the pressure that he's been applying will 100% have contributed to that.
So you would attribute any possible U-turn specifically to a sort of galvanised rebellion by Michael Gove?
Well, I mean, I do actually have a great deal of empathy with the Prime Minister, because, you know, you remember, you know, a lot of people wanted drastic action on the economy.
Well, she wrote a book about it. It's no surprise is what she's doing.
Exactly, and you know, throughout the whole hustings process, and you know, that was the kind of the ticket she was on. It hasn't quite worked, and I think that, you know, part of that, and there's so many audiences that she's playing to now, which obviously the markets was the first one, the public, of course, when they kind of caught wind of the changes that are being proposed, and then actually the MPs, and you forget that she didn't bring in people into the cabinet who didn't particularly back her during during that leadership campaign. And then when you see them outside the tent, Gove, Shapps as well was out and about, kind of, it causes you really, really damaging problems.
Yeah, but Michael Gove's now developing a reputation as a professional backstabber, isn't he?
Well, I mean, there were arguments about whether that happened, of course, during, you know, Boris's reign. I mean, I would be a little bit more generous than that. I think you see all the time kind of anonymous briefing in politics. And I think ultimately you do have to at least have a degree of respect for someone who will put his face to his beliefs. And
he did make a few compliments to the Prime Minister in that, as you say, extraordinary set piece yesterday, saying things like she was very authoritative and did her best to make her case. But you're right, you're absolutely right, though. You know, he did make the point, this is unconservative and
yeah, it's just really quickly, it's kind of a fairness thing, and you have to remember, like, these MPs, they have to go to their constituencies and they have to say, look, you may work on trains, you may be a nurse, we can't give you the pay rise, inflation, death spiral, all that kind of stuff that we were talking about during the summer. However, bankers, bonuses, and we're scrapping, you know, it just doesn't work on the doorstep.
Go on, Dawn. What do you think?
I want to ask Oscar, as a former advisor to Boris, what Boris is making all of this. Is he sitting there in the background going, yes,
of course he is. Of course he is.
Or is he concerned?
Not that easy after all.
But it's like you always want someone who succeeds you in your job to be slightly worse than you, don't you? You know, make me look good. Go on.
It's a very fair question. I think the boring answer I would give, but there is...
No, the exciting
yes.
Well, the exciting answer potentially, but the truth here is, you know, he was someone very, very impassioned by levelling up the country, and I think he'll want what's best for those communities. I think, you know, the fairness question, I mean, he is someone who would not have abolished that top rate of tax, I don't believe. And I think he'll just want to see the communities that never voted Tory before, that felt left behind, treading water. He'll just want what's best for them.
Fairness when it comes to tax, though, is a very difficult issue. Because people who earn less money always will say, well, it's not fair if someone who earns more money gets a benefit. But as Jan says, those who earn an extortionate amount of money pay an extortionate amount of tax anyway. I mean, a fair system in that sense would be flat tax, wouldn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, your view is, and the Vox Pox you did earlier in the show as well, is the really important thing that you do sometimes have to remind yourself at number 10. It can feel like a submarine almost, and you kind of... You have to always take a step back and remember, like, the common sense of voters. And I think because they didn't explain the budget, they didn't kind of use human stories about what this will mean for a working family. Not throwing numbers at people, but just their day-to-day lives, what tax breaks mean and what that strategy would actually mean for people individually. that didn't happen.
Well, also the energy guarantee, which was a huge deal, completely got overshadowed in all of this. And in many ways, again, feel sorry for them in that regard, but just terrible. Who's advising? Who's our special advisors?
Well, this is the whole point, though, of how important communications and advisors are. And we were talking, Oscar and I were talking about this earlier, and I think Jan's actually nailed it. I don't think it's the tax cut per se. It's the fact they didn't explain how they were going to fund it, where the money was coming from, because your knee-jerk reaction is, oh, my God, it's the rich that are going to get the pleasure, the poor get the pain again. They didn't explain how they were going to fund it, and they didn't really seem to communicate with anyone around them. I mean, you know, and this sort of like, you know, keep your friends close, but keep your enemies closer. And Liz Truss has surrounded herself, and the Gove thing proves that even more so, surrounded by herself by Team Liz. What she should have brought was Team Rishi on side. I mean, Gove was a Rishi supporter, wasn't he? I mean, originally it was Kemi Badenoch he supported, but he jumped to support Rishi. So,
but you ask whether or not Boris is relishing all of this. You do wonder if Rishi Sunak's also, you know,
he'll be
going to
relishing
conference. He's totally
He's going to be.
vindicated,
they're
isn't
going
he?
to be, aren't they?
Well, does all this mean that Truss is finished?